I'm Jim Check.
And I'm Renee Merrifield.
And we're here with Beyond the Ballot. We've missed the last couple of weeks because I was in Tokyo. And Tokyo, a wild place. Love it. Have you been to Tokyo yet, or Japan?
I have not. I've had friends go and I've had family go, but I have not yet been.
One of the wildest things that I couldn't believe is I see no homelessness. And I was there 10 days. I saw no homelessness. And I was in Tokyo and Osaka. And no drug addiction, nothing on the streets, no graffiti, clean everywhere. The subways, the trains were super clean. And I rode their bullet train to Osaka at 300 kilometers an hour, and it was like riding on a pillow, just unbelievably quiet. You didn't even feel like you were moving. It was like you're in an airplane. And it was like, when they picked up, and it was just so smooth and so nice. Like, it was unbelievable. And I've been on worse airplane rides.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I've heard the same things echoed by others. Everyone raves about how clean, how safe, how great it is that way, but then also how beautiful it is. So definitely have a very far right government in there right now. So it'll be interesting to see how she does.
And I'm going to leave this one last thought there. So I get up early. I think we've talked about it before. I get up at 3 in the morning all the time for some strange reason, and it's just what it is for me. And I was staying in the room with the family, so obviously I didn't want to wake them up and turn on TV or nothing or make noise or anything. So I went out for walks in the morning, 2-hour walks, different areas of Tokyo. So I'm walking around Tokyo and Osaka in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning for 2 hours. Felt completely safe, completely safe. And then in Kelowna, when I got back, I emceed an event here. And it was 6 o'clock, and I walked to the Innovation Center about a block and a half. I had to park down the street, and I was hassled by somebody that was obviously had some issues with drugs. And I would ask you the question, would you walk around Kelowna willingly at 3 o'clock in the morning?
No.
We got issues.
No. Like I've told, our staff gets walks to their cars because we have a parking lot that is
downtown, yeah.
Yeah, and our it's literally less than, let's call it 200 meters, but they have to walk through a back alley, and we have a buddy system just to try and make sure that they are safe.
Obviously, they're doing something that we're not doing, and that's something we need to look at there.
Jim, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times. It is possible, and it is possible to do things differently. It's possible to have, streets without crime and streets without drugs. It's possible to have your citizens not have drug use and abuse and substance use. And we just do not have the political will right now, and it's up to the people to vote in those that will.
I'm just going to ask, because I know you're traveling, but maybe if you have a napkin nearby, just maybe wipe your camera. You're a little blurry sometimes, I think. Maybe just give that a little bit of, maybe it's just causing something, maybe there's something on that camera and you don't notice it, but it seems a little fuzzy though. Or we'll just make do with what we have.
It might be my internet connection.
Yeah, it could be that too. Who knows? Anyway, we've got some big topics here. Pressure, one of them, we'll get to it after. Pressure builds on BC NDP to recall legislation, repeal DRIPA. But we're going to kick it off with what's going on in here in Canada. Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are trying to put through that motion there. That basically is the Liberal MOU, and just trying to get them to kind of, because there's a lot of dissent. It's obvious that there's some dissent in the Liberal Party. We saw that with Stephen Guilbeault leaving the cabinet and the caucus. And, they're trying to deny it. But we have a little clip here with the Environment Minister here. We'll play this little clip first.
You're saying that the Conservatives are trying to divide you on this issue. Is it not your government that is dividing your own caucus by bringing forward an MOU that clearly does not have the full support of your own party?
As a party, we are united in wanting to make sure that we continue to build Canada, that we build it well, that we take into account climate change in the work that we do, and that we respect Indigenous rights holders. Our party is united on that. And so I won't accept that as a premise for that question. We are united.
You is dividing your own caucus. You don't think there's divisions over that?
No.
So people can have issues with particular pieces, but we are supportive of the entire MOU.
You are supportive, but there are many of your other caucus members who are not
The
supportive.
caucus is supportive of the entire MOU. People, yes.
Mr. Hogan, was this a whip vote? Would you have wanted to vote in favor of the pipeline? Was this a whip vote for your caucus?
This was not a whipped vote for me. This is a very easy decision to vote no on. It is designed to divide.
I mean, that's the most fired up I've seen our government corrupted media in a long time. Like, there's obviously some dissent there. And it's, they say the Conservatives are playing games. I mean, the Liberals have been playing games with this thing for 8 months now, 9 months on this pipeline.
And exactly that. The game playing that Carney has done and that the Liberals have done has now come back to bite them. This is a very seasoned and very savvy political strategist of Poilievre, who knows that there are divisions, and he is putting acid in a wound, and he is going to make sure that those divisions are actually shown for what they are. So this is incredible work by an opposition party. This is absolutely putting government on the pin and getting all of them to speak. He's going to do a division call so that he can have every single person has to vote yay or nay. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens on this one.
Yeah, and when you know you're boxed in the corner, what do the Liberals do best? Act indignant, right? Act just indignant, and then say the other team's been playing games. Literally, you've been playing games with 8 months and saying one thing to one group of people, and then you go to the next group of people. The party's been split on this. I mean, Stephen Guilbeault has been campaigning on television there, saying that the Liberals are now throwing their climate change policies out. I mean, it's kind of a mess. There's a Liberal MP in BC walking through the forest talking about how it doesn't work. And
yeah, this is going to really bite the Liberals. Norman Spector this morning on X was talking about, he's predicting that there's going to be another election in the next 6 months, basically over this issue, because they are so divided as a caucus. And, you and I had this conversation. Carney cannot enact the things that he wants to with the current MPs that he has. He simply is inheriting this, this group that has been on a green, campaign and activism for so long that it's hard to even remember what it was before. So for him to try and take it back to, the Chrétien or Paul Montagne days, he is going to have to get rid of some of those MPs. And I don't see him having that political strength.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back and with Joe Biden administration, like this Liberal government kind of worked because it was piggybacking off the American kind of like agenda, the green agenda. But that's all been thrown in the dumpster. And around the world now, we're seeing that the Americans are selling LNG to the Japanese, the Germans, the South Koreans, and now Spain is begging Canada for LNG as well. And we're going to, to off our East Coast, but how are we going to get it there? So I imagine America is going to put its hand up and say, we'll sell you some LNG. And none of them are asking for CCUS as well. Nobody's asking for carbon capture credits. So this stuff they're selling, and I know that Mark Carney is motivated by that. I believe in the Brookfield has spent billions and billions of dollars on carbon capture, and that's kind of taking a little fat off the calf there, that tax scheme they have running in Alberta there with carbon capture.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's the carbon capture or if it's the actual, or if it's the appeasement that he's trying to do for his, for his caucus. I mean, maybe both, because they're both beneficial to him and to his agenda. But having said that, like you and I've talked about before, I hate that I even think about his conflicts of interest with Brookfield and their involvement in carbon capture, or the green economy for that matter. But I do think that that was unnecessary, and that's why the Liberal caucus is couching it as we agree with the whole MOU. But I mean, I don't know if you saw the amendment to the MOU, to the
We're going to play
motion.
that clip here right away. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But I mean, Poilievre, again, if you try and outmaneuver him, he's already thought through.
He's already ready.
He's already ready, and he is about to deflate that argument in 2 seconds' time.
Box him in the corner. But Stephen Guilbeault went on with Vasi Kapelas, and he played the ultimate Trump card. He played the card, and he says, if you continue down this road of pipelines, Quebec will separate. Although he did say in his same breath that Quebec's separatist movement has been going ahead for 30 months. So that has nothing to do with, like Carney or Trump or anything. So this separatist movement has been moving ahead in Quebec. But he said that they're surging in the polls, the Quebec separatist movement, and he's saying if they continue down this path, that's the end of Quebec in Canada. That's a
It's
card to play.
interesting because the Parti Québécois they are definitely surging in the polls. They are a separatist movement. He's right about that. That surge in the polls was before he left cabinet or before there was an MOU. But having said that, if I was prime minister, I'd call their bluff. And the reason that I call their bluff is because they literally do not have money to separate. They cannot financially stand on their own. They are not able to without the rest of Canada. The only provinces that are financially able to stand without the rest of Canada would be the prairies, and that's Alberta and Saskatchewan right now. Those are the only two. Ontario used to be one of those, but even now they're in such trouble deficit-wise, they're not going to be able to. So literally, I call their bluff. Fine, you want to leave, leave. And in the end, they will choose not to leave because their people don't want to be poor, and their people don't want to be without without supports.
Yeah, Ian and I on the show, Ian says that maybe it's best that Quebec leaves, then you can actually have a Canada that is more united, because Quebec seems to be calling all the shots all the time, and it has caused much of the grief. I mean, a lot of this green agenda has been driven by Quebec and this anti-energy policies. Even though they benefit from the transfer payments from Alberta, it seems like they don't like the energy policies in Canada and a lot of the other stuff. If you look at some of the MPs, in important cabinet positions, they all tend to be from the French part of Canada.
Yeah, agreed. So it would I'd call their bluff, not because I don't love Quebec, not because I don't feel that we're better together, but I do feel like the last time that a prime minister sort of let them have a referendum and let it move forward, they ended up voting against it because simply they cannot afford to leave.
We do have that little clip here from Pierre Poilievre. We're going to play that clip here.
He doesn't think that Albertans are paying high enough taxes. He wants a higher tax on the Alberta oil sector, a higher tax on Alberta gas, a higher tax on industries that build homes or farmers that produce food. Madam Speaker, Conservatives want a pipeline without a tax. That Liberal member for Calgary Confederation wants a tax without a pipeline.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I welcome the progress made in the amendment, but I am very, very curious how it did not mention industrial carbon pricing and the increase of the industrial carbon price as part of this amendment, one of the most important parts of the MOU. Would the member be willing to consider further amending his motion to do the entire MOU rather than again cherry-picking the things that his caucus seems to be willing to support?
Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, I think we just saw the Liberal member for Calgary Confederation saying that he opposes a pipeline to the Pacific unless it includes a massive, crippling carbon tax on his own province. I would encourage him to go around his province talking to the energy workers in his riding and say that the reason he voted against a pipeline is because he doesn't think that Albertans are paying high enough taxes. He wants a higher tax on the Alberta oil sector, a higher tax on Alberta gas, a higher tax on industries that build homes or farmers that produce food. Madam Speaker, Conservatives want a pipeline without a tax. That Liberal member for Calgary Confederation wants a tax without a pipeline.
There you go.
And I would say, that's Pierre with his first question, put him in check. Pierre with his rebuttal, put him in checkmate.
Yeah, I mean, they're in a box and they're going to start screeching. They lost the argument when they start screaming. You could see some like Tim Hodgson, he basically lost his cool. The environment minister, not cool enough to lose their cool, right? So it is, they've been put themselves in a box because they speak out of both sides of their mouth. That's the problem with this pipeline. They don't really want a pipeline. They just want to kind of placate the Canadian public.
Yeah, and Pierre's going to press hard on this. Pierre had the axe the tax and was stolen by Carney. And, he back then said this is, smoke and mirrors. He's going to come back with it in another way. this is the other way. And so this is going to give Pierre that platform to say, do you guys want taxation or not? And this is a perfect setup for Pierre to come back and say, and talk about the industrial tax. We know that polling across the country is against carbon tax. It doesn't matter if you call it an industrial carbon tax or a consumer carbon tax. The general public doesn't care. The general public doesn't know. All they know is it makes everything more expensive and inflation is going up. So they're, barely now. I mean, it's under control, but has experienced the positive effects of a lowering of carbon tax. So this is a dangerous place for the Liberals to find themselves. And I think that Norman Spector was right this morning in saying, like, this is going to make them go to the polls. And if they go to the polls on this issue again, they don't have a second chance. It's a double jeopardy that people I don't believe will trust what they say.
Yeah, and recent polls also show that the majority of Canadians support a pipeline. That is, the majority of Canadians, a large majority of Canadians support a pipeline, including British Columbians. And that's where, even the Conservatives, we'll talk about them later in BC, have a winning hand because they are pro-pipeline and the David Eby and his caucus are not. And that is, the majority of Canadians want a pipeline. They tie it to prosperity for Canada, which is basic common sense, right? You and I talk about it all the time. It's all about energy. You know what? You and I have been saying it for so long. You know who said it today? I think he's been watching our show. Donald J. Trump said it's all about energy. He used those words. And I was just like, man, there's somebody watching our show.
or
it's just common sense.
It's just good economics.
Yeah, it's just common sense. Yeah. I think it's probably mostly just common sense. But anyway, same language. And it is all about energy. And it just seems odd that the people in power, the Liberals and the NDP, are anti-energy when it is the majority of Canadians who vote for them. You know what I mean? They represent the majority of Canadians.
Yeah, energy is everything. And cheap energy is prosperity. So we have to have cheap energy to actually be prosperous. And the polling that was done about pipelines even showed Quebec was supportive. The only place that was not supportive was the Maritimes. So, go figure. Maritimes are out.
And then we on the really big show, which we do every morning at 9 a.m. A shameless plug there. 9 a.m. every morning, Ian and I. It's almost like a 2-hour show now. We're showing gas prices in the United States. Texas, Colorado, all below $2 a gallon. I think $1.69 right now in Texas in some areas, which is like 66 cents a liter. Cheap energy.
I was just about to convert that for you, yeah.
Cheap energy is the key to lowering inflation and a prosperous country. Like countries that have abundant energy also have a very well-to-do population.
And, I have to remind those that don't like Trump, this actually started under Obama. Obama came, and when he became president, he said, we will become independent from an energy perspective. And that's what he did. If you look back during his 8 years, he increased energy production exorbitantly. And some would love to credit him with all the renewables, but it was oil and gas. That's what he was doing. And, when he came to Vancouver and was at the convention center, Ian Black, who was the Vancouver Board of Trade CEO at the time, he actually, he asked the question. It was like the softball, like, what do you, credit your greatest environmental, success in your 8 years or whatever. And I loved how Obama responded. And, literally with his little bit of a Midwestern drawl, he said, now, don't get me wrong. The United States of America is undeniably an oil and gas producer. And he talked about how his success of increasing the production of the U.S. was one of his greatest successes. And, and then he went on to talk about the renewables that they had invested in. So it was like, he started this whole thing. Trump is just continuing.
Yeah, it was Joe Biden's administration that really did a lot of anti-energy policies and the EV mandates and all those things that they have now stripped away, including the carbon capture credits. That's why carbon capture companies are coming to Canada to take absolutely the 75 cents on the dollar tax credits for Carbon Capture USA that went into Alberta there. Carbon Capture USA into Alberta. If you could get 75 cents return on every dollar you spend in your industry, it's like you won the lottery, no? And then, and then have the ability to tax the industry by selling whatever you manufacture. Then you sell back to that same company. You sell them the credits. Basically, you're giving private companies the ability to tax our energy. The most important thing we have.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's ridiculous policy.
Let's move on, though. And it sounds like in this trade agreement, Carney went down there again for FIFA, and they did have a 45-minute visit. Trump, Sheinbaum, and Carney did meet for 45 minutes.
And then Trump comes over the top with a new fertilizer tariff.
Potash, yeah. He reminded me of Elon Musk in that meeting, because he met with a bunch of farmers and all that stuff in there in the room, and somebody complained about potash. He said, "What's going on with potash?" Yeah, slap a tariff on that. Just like, I don't know if that'll be, I think potash is too important to the Americans. And plus, Nutrien just did a big deal into the U.S. where they're actually going to use Washington to ship their potash, not BC. Because and David Eby was whining about that. And, I think Scott Moe is basically saying you're impossible to talk to. So why would we even bother?
Oh, you're impossible to talk to and your port doesn't work.
Yeah, there's that. One of the things that has come up, and this has come up before, this is, it sounds like the Financial Post is running this now. It sounds like it must be real. They're saying what's really been holding back Kuzma, and Ian and I talked about this quite a bit, is supply management. And this is what's held up trade deals in the UK and all that stuff. And they're saying that the Canadians may have to sacrifice supply management if they want a real trade deal. And that would benefit the consumer.
Oh, absolutely. And this, this goes back a long time. And Trump, right at the beginning, talked about our supply management principles and how that is being enacted in Canada, and said that, a trade deal is not possible until this is on the table for us. And so he's been very upfront with it. And, it's no surprise for the Financial Post to cover it. Maybe it's, bubbled back to the surface by negotiators, but it's always been on the table. And the rest of the world is not happy with what we're doing on that front. And I think if people understood it from a perspective of not just the propaganda that the dairy industry pushes out to Canadians, but actually from a cost perspective. And there was just a little bit of that last year when they showed milk producers that were literally putting milk down a drain because they had met the quota. Yeah, and they were just dumping the milk.
Well, Canadians go hungry.
Exactly. So I think that Canadians are starting to catch on, get word of this. And in talking with some of the dairy producers, they were like, "Well, we know eventually it'll have to go, but we just will hold on as long as we can." I think this has to go sooner than later. We don't need a playbook. It's already been done in Australia and New Zealand. Simply take the Australian playbook, which worked fairly well, compensated those that had bought quota, that had, for a percentage or a proportional share. Right. So if you bought it in the last, 5 years, you got a higher percentage than what, if you bought it 30 years ago and have been benefiting from it ever since. So I think this has to go on. And supply management comes up around our table, at Christmas time, my dad was, and all of his family were big dairy farmers. This is known, and dairy farmers around Canada have known that this is on the chopping block at certain points. So it should come as no surprise, and they should all have contingency plans for what should happen. But this will lower the cost of dairy to consumers, whether it's yogurt, whether it's cheese, whether it's milk. Chicken. It will lower it. And and also not only that, but it will also lower the cost of everything else that currently has a tariff on it. Because it's actually sacrificing all of our industries at the table of, and no pun intended, but at the table of the dairy industry.
And it increases competition because right now, the U.S. gets less than 5% access in Canada's agricultural market, and you get that competition. The same thing goes for the U.K. That's why we can't find a deal. It's this supply management stuff that goes on. We get better cheese, Ian says. If we could get a deal with the Brits, we would get some actually cheese he says it's better cheese. We're so used to eating our cheese. I don't know if it would be better to us or not, but
it would certainly be more exotic for sure.
There you go. And then
I bring back my full cheese allotment every year from Europe. that my husband and I go to visit his family there. We have our whole system down where we, saran wrap it and pack it and, have ice packs that we bring that won't melt and like into the Ziploc at 1, Ziploc 2, so it doesn't stink up our luggage. But like we bring back cheese because it is absolutely fantastic. And when you have cheese from Europe, it is far different than what the cheese is that we get here.
And then there's a couple of industries that Trump seems to really favor, and it's energy. Obviously, that I'd say that has his number one energy. AI is in the top there too. But farmers, he really seems to be really going for the farmers there. He talked a lot. He had the farmers in there. He took all those environmental regulations off John Deere. Nothing runs like a deer, and like all the CAFE standards off of the auto sector. All those things are coming off, and that's why the Stellantis and GM and Ford are breaking ground on new factories in the United States, because they make money selling combustion engine stuff. They make money selling it. They don't make money selling EVs. None of them do. So, I mean, it's just common sense, right?
It's common sense. Also, those are really big swing states. So when you look at where votes come from and where you need to get the votes in order to actually get elected as a president, it's those swing states. It's one of the reasons that Obama was successful, is that he was from that Midwest area. So I think that Trump is also savvy. He understands, that while it's not a lot of votes, they're very significant when it comes to strategy and voting efficiency.
And it also filters into the kitchen table for the consumers across the nation that have been complaining about the number one gripe, I think, in Canada and the U.S. is food prices, right? Food prices.
And they're right to do so. You go to Europe and they have not experienced the same inflationary pressures on their food. You can buy, whether it's milk or whether it's eggs or whether it's or whether it's bread at such a huge discount to what we are paying for. There was actually a social media post that showed what it costs in Germany versus what it costs in Canada, and they just did from Sobeys. It wasn't an expensive store by any stretch, and they showed bread price to bread price, orange to orange, all the way down, and how much more we are spending here in Canada is astronomical. Well, the U.S. is similar. The U.S. has faced those inflationary pressures. So Trump is wise to hit the farmers. People are sympathetic to farmers. Farmers are hard workers. They have a rough life, in large part. They work 24/7. So for them, it is a sympathetic aspect, and they know that the better off their farmers are, the cheaper their food is.
Yeah, if we get competition out of the U.S. manufacturers, food will go down dramatically. And again, I was in Tokyo or Japan, Osaka, Tokyo for 10 days. Food was cheaper there. And there was no homelessness. There was no drug addiction that I saw. And the streets were clean. The subways, I would lay down in the subway cars and it was just absolutely clean. People were very, very respectful. So if it can be done there, that Tokyo, the largest city in the world. So if you think any city should have problems, you would think the largest city in the world should have problems. Go there, experience it. Because a lot of Canadian politicians stand up and say, oh, this is a worldwide problem. Stand there in the middle of Hastings and in Vancouver, and then stand there in the middle of Tokyo. I mean, I was in Shinbon, all those, in the heavy populated areas where everything, it's just not there. It's just not there.
This is not a worldwide problem. This is an ideological problem. Where you find ideology on the civil rights side that says drug addicts should be able to be drug addicts wherever they are, and we should keep them alive at whatever cost.
Decriminalization, all that stuff. Yeah.
That is where you find the prolific crime and the prolific, drugs everywhere.
I'm just going to throw 2 more points at this. One is, when Carney got elected, the first thing they did was put a fence around supply management. Remember that vote? They said that this is a non-negotiable. Well, I doubt if that's going to work. But they said it was a non-negotiable. And a lot of this is driven by our friends in Quebec as well, some of the biggest beneficiaries of supply management.
Yeah, they are. And that dairy association is very strong. Their lobbying is very, very effective, and they are very wealthy. So they have a lot of money to do the campaigns and the ads and to let Canadians know that they have a higher quality, because they can't say lower priced, but higher quality of dairy, but as defined by whom? I know many people that would love to get unpasteurized milk, but you can't get it unless you actually own a dairy. So I based on what, based on who, I think that we need to look at it. I think it's time, and everything kind of has a season and has a time.
Yeah, I think at some point you got to put the Canadian first and not, special interest groups. And somebody is joking here, I guess there's lots of comments in here saying that we can fix Japan, they just need more diversity. Definitely, they just elected what some media outlets in Canada, legacy government crippled and corrupted media, are calling a far-right extremist leader, but Japan seems to be doing quite well. And here's one point that I want to make, and then I'll move on.
I can't see the chat, so if I'm not responding to anyone, I apologize. I can't see the chat because it's been turned off for me.
One comment that my son made while we were there, he's like, and this is wild. He said, "Why do they love America? Like, there's American flags everywhere and everything like that. Like, what's the deal with that?" And I said, "Well, they know they rest comfortably at night under the protection of the United States military, and they appreciate that and respect that." Similar to Canada, except we're the spoiled, entitled brat that wants to stick a stick in their eye.
Yeah, and I mean, we think of ourselves as something that we are not. And I think that if we actually understood what was going on and how vulnerable we are, and how much we are being threatened by powers that would desperately love the Arctic and would desperately love to come over to Canada and have a shared border like Russia does, or like China, I think we would have a different mindset.
Yeah, the last two incursions into our airspace were responded to by
U.S.
United States of America jets, because we were on the tarmac there.
No, our F-18s couldn't even get off the ground.
That's what I mean. They're just trying to start them. They're just like, somebody's like, "Who got the key? Who got the keys?"
It's go time. It's go time. Our military is so underfunded. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't have the right uniforms. I mean, honestly, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing how. And the one thing I will give credit to Carney where it's due is that he is trying to spend on military right now. Not in the right way, but definitely trying to spend on the military.
Yeah, and then I'll just put this point on, because they said they gave them a 20% raise for the lowest end there for the privates and that for joining up. That means they got like a $2 an hour raise, really got a 20% raise, because they were basically making $20 an hour. So they got, maybe at $42,000 now. And then compare that to the average bureaucrat that makes $136,000. Something is upside down.
Upside down. I mean, I think that individuals who are putting their bodies at risk and are sacrificing physically should be lauded to the same extent that someone who's putting their mind at work.
And I'm going to lay this last one for the BC stuff, because I wanted to get to the BC stuff. But this lay in there. Ian and I did it. Bonuses. The federal government, it's bonus time, and it's Christmas, and it's bonus time for the feds. 90 to 100% of the feds get bonuses, no matter what. And I think you got to go back and watch that. I think in the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, some of those bonuses are high as $85,000 on average. Absolutely crazy. One person that was making $177,000 a year for CRA didn't show up for work, and they didn't give her bonus of $5,000. She complained and fought it, and sure enough, she got her bonus. Right? So.
Oh, that's ridiculous. Just
anyway,
ridiculous.
Bonus time for the feds. Not so much for Canada in general. But let's move on to the BC section here, because there's so much going on in BC right now. But the most important thing is there's a lot of pressure coming from the Conservatives right now. We'll get into the Conservative Party in a bit here, but on repealing DRIPA, because of that recent ruling there, where the courts used DRIPA in their judgments there. And let's listen in, first of all, here to Tom Isaac, a leading expert on Aboriginal law. This is a global interview.
Does BC, in your expert opinion, need to repeal, change, or keep DRIPA as is?
Based on where British Columbia finds itself today, I think there's only one answer. DRIPA needs to be repealed.
He literally wrote the book on Aboriginal law. Tom Isaac says last week's BC Court of Appeal ruling on Indigenous mining rights potentially changes all areas of BC law. Isaac says he warned the BC government not to adopt DRIPA, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, but it was approved unanimously by all MLAs in 2019.
There's a paragraph in the decision that's very interesting where the court says essentially it was the legislature that imposed this complex set of rules that are essentially untested at law into British Columbia law. It was the legislature that did that, not the Constitution, not the Supreme Court of Canada.
The legislature is now on a 2-month break. The opposition wants DRIPA repealed and says MLAs should be called back to Victoria immediately.
I believe right now we need to be in this House doing the work of the people, and that is what we are asking the Premier to do. We can get this work done in 2 to 3 days.
But the Premier wants to amend DRIPA, not scrap it, and he's in no rush to call back the House.
I'll be frank. We got the decision on Friday. This is a significant decision. The amendments need to not create additional uncertainty. Take some time to put that together, to work with different stakeholders, First Nations partners, the business community and others, to make sure that the amendments actually achieve the goal.
That goal, he says, is stability, adding his government will go to the wall to defend private property rights. But as it stands, British Columbians are in for at least 2 more months of instability and uncertainty. Jordan Armstrong, Global News.
I think he's being really generous there. 2 more months of uncertainty in British Columbia?
No, and I mean, I've been on a number of different calls and briefings for this within the business community with Tom Isaac, actually, and Jeffrey Moyes. And basically, what is being said is that this Friday's decision, it didn't just say that DRIPA had to be implemented across the board or stands as law, and that all laws must be read through it. It actually sped up the time frame and lowered the threshold of proof for claims. So for title claims, previously, what we saw with the Cowichan decision is this very methodical title history that has to be rendered for every single title. What this last case did was say, no, you don't actually have to do that. You can just prove that you used it at some point, and it can be these blanket areas. So this changed the game. And that is why Tom Isaac is so vehement that it must be repealed in its entirety.
Yeah, I've interviewed Jeff Moyes, I think 4 times now. And he said this, we've talked about this, it's not part of our Constitution. It's something that the BC government has decided to enact on their own through legislature. I don't believe you were part of government when it was passed, right? You weren't there, because it was unanimous, though, too. The Liberals and the NDP passed it at the time, I guess not knowing where it would end up.
And there are some videos in social media of MLA and the Honorable Mike de Jong, because he was a minister for many, many years and the finance minister for his last years in government. But Mike asked several times of government, and I believe he said to me, I've asked 7 times during that debate if this was going to be a way that all law would have to be read. And 7 times government said no. So this, for a justice now to use this and say, no, all laws must be read through DRIPA, I think is a game changer. And that's, and Tom Isaac, what he's saying and telegraphing is, if this is an issue that was created by law in the Legislative Assembly, the only remedy is through the Legislative Assembly, because the court system deals with laws as is. So any court of appeal, any Supreme Court would look then at new laws that are put in place right now for that certainty. For David Eby to say he's going to play around the edges, I think is a dangerous political move for him. Indigenous people don't actually usually vote. They're not a big population of voters. So I think this is a dangerous area. I mean, right now, the Indigenous claims are not just about property rights. They're also about things like access to our provincial parks. The last decision on Friday was about a gold mine. and about the Indigenous actually owning not only the, the title, but also all of the infrastructure and all of the resources that are associated there. So if you take that to its like grand conclusion, and you look at all the title claims that are all over BC, you basically have half of what BC's government currently makes through the resource sector going into Indigenous hands rather than to the government of BC.
And even I think scarier than that is, like, if you're talking about any company that has capital to deploy, and they say you want to put infrastructure into a gold mine or whatever, because it takes vast amounts of capital, billions of dollars, and you say, oh, you're going to invest in this gold mine or whatever, and then if you could lose it in a court decision overnight, why would you?
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to. The certainty that's required here is way bigger than tinkering around the edges of DRIPA. It has to be repealed. It was never intended for the use in law. EB and there's a lot of things that happen in subsequent governments. In this particular case, this is EB. EB was the architect as the Attorney General. He is the architect and the implementer as the Premier. So this has him all the way through. And I love that on social media, the 2010 Olympic videos of him are recirculating with him saying like stolen land, and his ideology is on display in some of those earlier videos. So this is him, and he and his government are going to have to wear it. But this is a mess, and I can't sound the alarm bell loudly enough. If our economy wasn't enough to get a little crazy about, this is next level, and this is not going to get our economy back on track in the way that we need it to. This is going to scare away capital dollars, just like you and I have talked about however many times before. So these cases are very, very problematic for average BC residents who are just trying to make a living and provide for families.
This should be front page news on CBC, the government-funded media, the state broadcaster. And if you could pull up the CBC, we'll see that it's right there at the top. No, it's not.
I was going to say, oh no, you're going to be so disappointed.
No, it's not.
I know.
If Nick's going to pull it up here. There you go. Do you see it anywhere? But look at this. Look at even at that headline there. Liberals to vote against Poilievre's pipeline motion, calling immature and insult. They didn't say anything about that Liberals for the past 8 months talking out of both sides of their mouth and being childish about it. Nothing but, look, conservative motion designed to force. This is a pro-liberal website. Basically, just take the press releases that come out of the PMO's office, put them on here, and there you go. You got yourself a news organization.
Yeah, and honestly, if they, I love that the readership of the CBC is going down, and those that watch CBC is going down. So I know that the rest of the headlines are going to read Liberals vote down MOU for pipeline. And there's going to be a lot on social media about that very thing, because this was a well-designed motion by the Conservatives to really show the Liberals' true colors.
Do you know what is going up in Canada? The cost per reader on the CBC, you take $1.55 billion and divide it by the declining amount of people that read the CBC, and you're going to end up with almost $1 million per reader on the CBC. Basically, the Liberal use it as a propaganda machine, and that's and I say that very confidently. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Like, where's this story? We do this almost every day on our news show. We pull up, we outline all the stuff from fraud, waste, scandals, abuse, all that stuff, and we pull up the CBC website and say, where's the story? Nowhere to be found. That's where it is.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, this is a BC story. It's a made in BC problem. It's an NDP BC problem. So maybe it's not going to make headlines, although I know that I did see a social media post that said, these major things are going on, like the Cowichan decision and the new Gitsla, overturn. And at the same time, all that CBC talked about in BC was, the crazy of last week in the BC Conservative Party. So I am disappointed that that's what they choose to showcase. And you're right, it is very agendized, and it's very agendized to the left. And I don't like media that is either way. I struggle. And so someone asked me, well, what do you read? And I'm like, I read the Globe and Mail and I read the National Post every single morning. And they're like, well, why do you read both? And I'm like, because they are very different perspectives.
I read it all. Like, I mean, just like, everything from CNN to MSNBC to, like, I mean, this is what we live in. We live in this thing, and a CBC and CTV and
yeah, agreed.
All of it. And let's move on to the leadership in BC. They have a big bomb drop. Well, I was in Tokyo, and you and I weren't on the air for a bit. John Rustad finally caved to the pressure. Turned it into a bit of a circus, though, before he finally relented there, because the party actually even named Trevor Halford interim leader. Well, John Rustad said, "Hell no, I won't go."
And as the media was describing, like both of them sitting, waiting for their meetings with the speaker, I was like imagining, because most of us as MLAs would have time meetings with the speaker, and so I was like imagining them both in the waiting room, and like I'm like, oh, what would that conversation look like?
It reminds me of
I also thought Vaughn Palmer and Rob Shaw were great at giving the play-by-play commentary about what was happening, and during that question period, John literally walked into question period, sat down, took a seat as if nothing was happening, but didn't say a word to anyone, and then got up and left right after question period. Like, again, as my phone was lighting up with all of the news, I was texting, back and forth to a number of political individuals, and my comment was, read the room, John. It's over. Like, when you have lost the confidence of the vast majority of your MLAs, it's over. Yeah. It's over. And that is no longer called leadership. That is called obstinance or arrogance or petulance. I don't know what you want to call it, but I just want to say, I told you so.
Yeah, and I think
not a surprise. This was the inevitability that was going to happen. The difficulty is that this is a party that doesn't have a lot of political capital amongst the population. So it's going to be hard for them. The next leader, it's going to be hard for them too. I was talking with a former MLA today, and he was saying, yeah, but Renee, remember Gord Wilson and the Tyabji disaster, and then in comes Campbell, and Gordon Campbell was able to take them to a whole new level. It took him 2 terms or 2 elections to do it, but that's also because the NDP had shorter timeframes of elections. So the NDP will have already been 10 years by the time they vote. We vote next. So it'll be very interesting to see. And I think that if we get a strong outside leader, just like we had when Gordon Campbell came on the scene, I think that it'll be palatable for people, and that they won't be associated with one party or the other's garbage.
I think this is David Eby's worst nightmare, because I think he knew he could beat John Rustad. John Rustad let his ego get in the way, and I think he could have formed government too if it wasn't for his ego when Kevin Falcon bailed. I think not making a unified big tent party and saying he could do it on his own with some MLAs that weren't properly vetted, I think cost him the election, because it was very close. He came within a whisker. I mean, you have to give him credit there. He took a party from nowhere, really, and brought it to within a whisker, but I think his own ego kind of caused shortcomings.
I'm going to say those decisions not only cost him the election, it cost him his leadership. It was that amount of drama, whether it was, the One BC, Tara Armstrong and Dallas Brody's, who nobody thought should have been MLA candidates ever, or if it was the Eleanor Sturkos or the Jordy, Keelys, like these,
shaming Amelia Volpe.
Oh, yeah. Like his leadership tactics were just abysmal, and every single one of those is a direct result of his leadership choices. You can't get away from that. There's no one else to blame. So I think this is the best thing that could ever happen to BC. We need a strong opposition doing their job, and paying less attention to their own caucus and way more attention to what the constituents need.
And I think it is like this is David Eby's worst fear, because it's the unknown right now. Because it does, like you and I have talked in the past, doesn't Eleanor Sturko or somebody, because she was kicked out because of her strong voice, or, like there's quite a few people in there. Maybe it's an undiscovered person, right?
Oh, my chicken. Eleanor Sturko, just, what was it, this morning or yesterday morning, was on Mike Smith. That woman gets more media attention and is in the Vancouver Sun, on the radio, being interviewed by Global, more than any other MLA that's in opposition currently. More than any other MLA, including ones that have critic roles. So honestly, would she be a force? Absolutely. Does she have the chops? Not sure. Does she have the, the backing and the money? I'm not sure about that either. But, she'd have to come back into the fold first and foremost. But the other names that I've heard bantered about are very strong as well. I've heard Ian Black considering, he was a great CEO of the Vancouver Board of Trade, knows business, would be a strong voice for the economy, a very neutral voice when it comes to all the social aspects of the activism that we need to get away from. So he'd be a very strong voice. Lost his race on the Conservative. You and I covered that race, and I was disappointed to see it, but he would be a strong one. But there is a sleeper out there that I think might surprise us all. And I don't want to say it too soon, but I'm going to, because I have been told it's not a secret. But I've heard that Chris Gardner is organizing. So for those listeners who haven't heard of Chris Gardner, he is the CEO of the Independent Construction Association, ICBA. Independent Construction Builders Association. Thank you. I just want to make sure I got that right. He has been a strong opposition voice against Eby. He has been advocating for one of our largest industries, which is called construction, for 85% of the workers, which all are underneath that association. He is a brilliant strategist. He is very eloquent, comes out of the communications background. So he just has a very, very unique and strong voice that could be well received by the vast majority. He's also incredibly likable. He's got, he's just a really, really good person, kind person, but strong voice right now.
And Eby is ripe for the plucking, as they would say, because I think the majority of British Columbians want a pipeline. That's an easy one right there. The health crisis, it's a mess. It's an absolute mess, especially in the interior. It's an absolute mess. Decriminalization, failure. He even said so himself, and look what it's done to our province. The economy, the debt, everything, like in DRIPA, and you know what I mean? Like there's, I don't know what he could point to for success. That's the thing that I think, what can you point to? He talks about shovel-ready projects, but who's going to put money behind a shovel right now because of DRIPA, buddy? I shouldn't say buddy, but Mr. Premier, who's going to put money behind a shovel because of that?
Exactly. We don't have answers to the fundamental questions of what law do we follow when there is Indigenous title? We don't even know.
Oh. So just step down. Say BC doesn't have a government and let the Indigenous people run. At least then we'd know who the leader is, David Eby. Because right now we have no idea what's going on. And people are even worried about selling houses. I've heard from realtors here in Kelowna saying people aren't buying because they're unsure of what's going on with British Columbia.
Oh, I would agree. I'd agree. It's going to get worse, not better.
Yeah. So, and I was just going to play this clip here, and this is from a lady here, because we're almost running out of time here. A clip we could go probably for a couple hours, but I'm going to play this clip here for this lady follows politics, and it's just a regular person on the internet here, and she's just sharing some of the stuff that's going on in BC, and just want to hear it from just a common person here.
I have a message for David Eby because I know he won't hear it from the people around him. David, you are destroying British Columbia. Do you have any idea how many people are out of work because of your policies? Over 24 mill closures and 8,000 forestry jobs lost in the last 4 years alone. And you're making excuses as the food bank lineups grow. Do you know how many people have left BC to find opportunities in other provinces? 70,000 in the last year alone. Our best and our brightest are leaving because they don't see a path to prosperity here. Do you have any self-awareness of your role in BC's declining standard of living? For the past 2 years, people have gotten poorer despite working harder than ever to make ends meet. Do you even care about the mountain of debt you're leaving for our kids to pay off? $80 billion since you came into office, with nothing to show for it but a bloated bureaucracy while people die on wait lists in our broken disaster of a healthcare system. Are you at all interested in setting families up for success? Because our streets aren't safe, there's needles in our playgrounds, our kids are spending their school days getting fed your ideology as their educational outcomes fall. Young people are deciding not to have families at all because they can barely pay their rent. Every day you are in the Premier's office, the promise of our incredible province is diminished. But it does not have to be this way. We should be and we can be the most.
So, just so you know, she's not a nobody and she's not just an neighborhood person. That is Dr. Caroline Elliott. So she was the sister-in-law to Kevin Falcon. She was one of the primary strategists for Kevin's team. She is incredibly smart, very bright. She is she did her PhD, or maybe it was her master's, but in the Indigenous reconciliation area and kind of the path that we were going down. Follow her on social media. She is a very loud voice. She is used by Global a lot as a political commentator. She is so she's on a lot of media channels, a lot of always on a right of center. She's definitely conservative. No two ways about that. You won't get that a whole lot, but not a social conservative, just much more a fiscal conservative. So she is, but she has been hammering on EB and also really getting the news and the facts out about the Cowichan decision, about this appeal, and talking very straight about it. She's right about everything here, but she is also one of the ones that is speculated to run for the leadership of the BC Conservative Party.
Well, there you go. I picked a common person. Turns out she's not so common. And you know what? I'm going to reach out and see if I can get her on. Maybe we can get her on with you and I.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I can reach out. I'll have her contact information.
You do that and see if we can get her on next week. That'd be great. That'd be awesome. And she put up Domtar there, and I have the mayor on Friday. The mayor of Crofton there is coming on, because what I really want to do is get people the idea of what that does to a community, because that mill is that community. It's a small town, and that's basically all across BC. These mills, when they close, the Prince George lost 8 mills in the area in the last 3 years. That is so devastating, because these jobs are the ones that, just like in your industry, these are the jobs that people buy pickup trucks and they buy houses and they build families with these jobs. In the last little while, the Liberals have been touting the job numbers for the past 2 months. They said this last one, they were out there, 54,000 in job growth. But if you look underneath the hood there, 63,000 part-time jobs gained, 9,000 full-time jobs lost. Same thing going on in the month prior. That is not a sign of a healthy economy. 1 in 5 Canadians now works part-time. Part-time jobs typically come at a lower pay level and also don't come with benefits. And yet they continue to tout it like it's a great thing, and that's the thing underneath the hood. And that doesn't include the layoffs that are coming for Domtar, the layoffs that are coming for Algoma Steel. There's a mill that's shut, curtailing operations in Alberta. These are jobs or industries that fuel a whole community. That's what people don't get. Is, they just, they can work somewhere else. Where? In Bear Lake, when they closed the mill there in northern BC. What job? You know what I mean? Like where? Where should they work, right? When they close a mill in northern communities, well, what should they do other than that? These are like industry-specific jobs that are tough to replace, especially with the amount of money that they make at it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Last thing, and it's a quick one, and this is just to kind of like, Elon Musk under attack with the EU because they're going after X, and it made X the #1 platform in all 27 nations in the EU as soon as the EU went after him with a fine. And X is now one of the #1 news outlets or platforms in the world. And here, this announcement just dropped here actually just a while ago. The European Commission dropped this. Canada and the EU have formed a digital partnership. This is not good news for Canada.
Not good news at all. You know, and I would be, you know, if I was advising the EU, I would say, like, be careful who you mess with. You know, he has a very large voice. You know, he immediately said the EU should be disbanded. You know, it's that's going to be very, that's a really dangerous one for them. And also the premise on which they're basing their decision on, it was kind of hinky. Like, you know, as I read it, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like, but for us to be so allied with the EU is really quite dangerous. The EU is not doing well right now. So that's like, that's like us jumping from one bad thing to another. So it's like, well, our relationship with the US isn't going great, so let's go and jump onto the EU. No, the EU is not doing great right now. So, you know, ally with individual countries in a mutually beneficial way that actually does something great for our trade, absolutely. But this is Carney's ideology, right? He really thinks of himself as a European rather than a Canadian. And I am not comfortable with these blanket agreements that don't really benefit Canada in any way, shape, or form.
And then there's a reason the UK left the EU as well. And, you know, Hungary pushing back on the EU's mandatory migration stuff, and then Poland now pushing back, and Czech Republic now pushing back. So there is, you know, like a lot of dissension in the EU, and for us to sign up to this, and they're putting people in jail in the EU and in the UK for, you know, like calling somebody a pig because they raped a girl. You get to go to jail for that.
Yeah.
Wild. Anyway, that's our show. Pretty good show again as usual. And we thank you. You're on the road and made the show. So.
No,
again,
I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. And till next week, we thank you for watching Beyond the Ballot, and we thank you for watching Now Media. And if you like what we're doing, please hit the share, like, and then get this out there. Help us spread the message. We don't have the $1.55 billion, but if you look at what we talked about, and you look at what CBC's putting out there, you ask us, which one's the better value? That one should be a pretty easy answer, right? Anyway, thank you for watching Now Media.